Hi, I'm Nathan from Serious Geeks, and in this video I'm going to talk about the special rule Reanimation Protocols from Codex Necrons 9th edition. It's a fairly substantial rule, there's a lot of wording there, but all that does is explain how it's used, and it's actually fairly simple and intuitive when you actually use it. In short, whenever an enemy unit attacks one of your Necron units with the Reanimation Protocol special rule, which is any unit that has more than one model in it, you get to roll dice for how many models that you've lost from the enemy unit that phase. The amount of dice rolled is equal to the total of wounds of the models lost in that attack. As an example, if a Space Marine Intercessor squad fires at a Necron Warrior squad and kills 6 models, those 6 models all have 1 wound each, therefore you roll 6d6, 6 dice, and for each 5 up, 1 model will be set back up on the table. The caveat here is you have to be able to equal the amount of wounds of the entire model before you can bring it back. So logically, a single d6 will actually bring up a single 1 wound model from the dead. If you have a 2 wound model, you have to pass 2 Reanimation Protocols rolls to bring back 1 model. And obviously it goes up in increments of how many wounds are available. So Scorpec Destroyers with 3 wounds each, you need to roll 3d6 passes of Reanimation Protocols before you can bring back 1 model. So, if we look at the base rules without any benefits such as Relics or other special rules from other models, you can see that Reanimation Protocols works really well for units that have 1 wound models in, but it gets incrementally worse and less efficient as you go up in wound value. In practice, I can honestly say, from the games that I've played with it and from analysing the actual rule itself, that Reanimation Protocols works brilliantly for 1 wound models. The old problem of Reanimation Protocols was it could only be used at the beginning of your turn, and it meant the opponent had the opportunity to just pour attention onto 1 unit and wipe it out. Whereas now, Reanimation Protocols is used at the end of each attack. So if someone has, say, 4 squads that are all going to fire at your warrior squad, you will get Reanimation Protocols as long as the squad is still active after the attacks of each one of those units. So it works quite effectively in that regard. What it does completely fail to achieve is any form of benefit to models that have more than 1 wound on their profile. If, for example, you lose 3 Lich Guard from enemy fire in 1 turn, you'll roll 6d6. For each 5 up you roll, it goes into wound pool, and when you can bring back a 2 wound model with enough wounds, you can do so. Which means statistically in this example, you're likely to bring back 1 model. It gets noticeably worse when you have things like Scorpec Destroyers, which are harder to bring down, so it often takes several units to bring down 1 unit. They have a toughness of 5 and a stratagem that enables you to have a -1 to wound. So bringing down more than 1, they have 3 wounds apiece, can be a tall order for some armies, especially if you have lots of small units on the table attacking those Necrons. So, in this circumstance, you're only going to be rolling, say, 3d6 to bring back 1 model at a time, because you've only lost 1 model, and then, as an example, you may have lost 5 wounds in your Necron Scorpec Destroyers, which takes off 1 model and then puts 1 down to 1 wound, and then at that point you have to roll 3d6 to try and bring that model back, but they all have to be 5+, which is incredibly unlikely. This creates a thematic problem. The theme of Necrons is they are supposed to be reanimated corpses, essentially. They're like a 40k version of undead. They've had Reanimation Protocols in one way or another since their inception, and for some reason it only works for a very small portion of the army. I'm not sure what the idea was here in the design philosophy. The Reanimation Protocols is supposed to be a core facet of the army, and Necron Warriors, as an example, are supposed to have the weakest ability to reanimate. They're supposed to be the least advanced out of all the Necrons, and they get noticeably more advanced as you go up the tiers of ranks of Necrons. So, if anything, Reanimation Protocols just doesn't work how it should work. It's thematically broken. It doesn't make sense. From a balance perspective, you're paying 35 points for a Scorpec Destroyer that can't really be reanimated. It can heal 1 wound a turn on 1 model, which is all you really need, which is quite nice. But that's it for the faction special rules. You compare that to a 35-point model in a Space Marine army, or close to 35 points. I mean, look at their 3-wound toughness 5 models. Heavy intercessors, which are cheaper than Scorpec destroyers. They don't have the killing potential of Scorpec destroyers, of course, but they are a troops choice. You know, obviously it's apples and oranges here, but they're a lot cheaper. Anyway, look what they have access to as army-wide rules. They have the combat doctrines, they have shock assault, they have bolter discipline, and then you have the other aspects to it. A Technomancer can heal one Scorpec destroyer once per game if it pays points to be able to do so. Space Marines can pay points to have a more efficient method, but they can have a Chief Apothecary for a similar points value as the Technomancer that can use a stratagem every turn, every game, for 0 command points if it's a Chief Apothecary, which is approximately the same points as the Technomancer you're taking. And he can raise a model without even rolling. It just gets up, and he can do it every turn to the same unit. It's not sour grapes necessarily, it doesn't thematically work in my mind. I think that Reanimation Protocols and raising models from the dead in the Necrons army, it isn't working. It's not efficient, it's not effective. It's great if you take nothing but 1-wound models, but you know, what if you want to take other choices? What if all those brand new Necron units that come out, the Scorpec destroyers, you know, the Locust heavy destroyers, all these new models, and they just don't get the benefits to Reanimation Protocols, and it's actually worse for them than it ever was. I mean, at least in the previous edition, that a lot of people didn't like the Reanimation Protocols, but if a unit of Necron destroyers or whatever multi-wound models was reduced to 1 man, you can still raise them up. You could still get models back on. So if the opponent failed to wipe them out, you got a benefit to that. Now, Scorpec destroyers, if you have a unit of 6 and you lose 5 of them, well, yeah, then you might actually raise 1 or 2 of them up, but the unit's already been smashed to pieces. If a unit can be reduced to 5 models in 1 turn and it's Scorpec destroyers, there are bigger problems happening. The most likely losses you'll take in your Scorpec destroyers over a turn is 1 enemy unit will equal 1 dead model, or maybe 2. So you're very unlikely to actually get any models raised from the dead there. Of course, there are benefits to Reanimation Protocols, particularly for the 1-wound models. There are ways to increase it. You can use certain relics to raise models up, and you could also use the Reanimator, which is a very little thought of unit, but it can boost up something like Necron Warriors quite nicely if it's amongst them. And, you know, the +1 to Reanimation Protocols is quite nice, it's quite handy. It's a lot of points and investment to not really work very well on Scorpec destroyers, but 4+ does make a little bit of a difference. Resurrection Orbs also enable you to roll for the whole unit, so everything that has previously been lost, but again, that is a once per game effect that you have to use on 1 unit. So in this case, you have to hope that your Scorpec destroyers are low enough in models that it makes it worthwhile and efficient to use that Resurrection Orb, but also you've got a good chance of bringing some models back. So ideally, you want 1 model out of 6 left alive when you use the Resurrection Orb. And then, at least that way, you'll be rolling 5 times 3, that's 15 d6, on that unit to try and bring back some models. You might actually stand a chance then. It's possible. But of course, it has a lot of variables and negatives attached to it. You have to have a character model nearby, amongst those Scorpec destroyers that have lost a lot of models, to raise them up and use his once per battle on 1 unit item to be able to do so. Also, it's not very likely to bring back more than 1 or 2 models, so again, it just ceases to become cost effective and efficient to even try and run for it. Locust Destroyer Lords, though, they can actually keep up with Scorpec destroyers. They're quite tenacious and tough, and they can be given Resurrection Orbs, so they do have a little bit of a capacity to try and raise some models up. It's a lot of points investment, but it could be worthwhile for some people, especially if you have quite a lot of destroyers in your army and you want to try and bring some of them back from the dead. For models with less wounds, such as Warriors and Immortals, there are a lot more chances to bring models back using Resurrection Orbs and Reanimation Protocols benefits, such as the Orb of Eternity and the Reanimator. I mean, these things will make your 1-wound army very powerful, if that's what your theme is, and they'll be very tough to bring down. So overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Really good for some units, very average for others, and terrible for quite a few units. I mean, try and bring back some Canoptech spiders and you've got no hope. It's actually kind of laughable just how poor the rule works with them. If they have a unit of 3 and they lose one model, you have to roll 6d6 to bring back one Canoptech spider. In fact, if you lost 2 of the unit, you'd roll 12 dice, and all of them would have to be 5-ups to bring back 2 models, and 6 of those would have to be 5-ups to bring back 1 model. If you had 5 5-ups, you failed. No models come back up. It's absolutely terrible. There are relatively easy fixes that could be FAQ'd into the rule at fairly short notice if they wanted to fix it. Some examples would be keeping the same rule, but for each 5-up rolled, you heal 1 wound to the unit, and that can include models that are still alive. And then once you've got all of those models up on 1 wound, any additional 5s can bring back 1 wound from 1 dead model. And then you start healing that unit next. I mean, that wouldn't be perfect, but at least you'd have a chance of raising up at least 1 model from a multi-wound unit more often. I mean, it's better than nothing. Another alternative might be the Reanimator. FAQ it so that it can literally heal 1 model from those units a turn, or D3 models from Warriors or Immortals, however they want to balance it. And then it would have a place. People will be able to say, it's actually worth putting a Reanimator in amongst the rest of my army. I would actually enjoy a Reanimator then. It would heal up 1 model a turn. I mean, you'd probably have to limit it so that it can't work on Canoptech units, because you don't want to be healing up a whole spider every turn. But have it work on everything else, that works perfectly. Another fix would be to artificially increase the Reanimation Protocols score needed to raise models up for certain units. So as an example, Scorpec Destroyers could raise on a 3+. It's a lot more likely then, still not guaranteed. You'd still have to roll 3 3-ups to be able to bring 1 back from the dead if you've lost 1 from that attack, but it's at least a little bit more likely. We could all wish list a lot of different fixes that could be had here. It depends on which direction the design team want to go in, but they need to do something. The theme of the Necrons is Reanimation Protocols, and they don't get it. The only models that really benefit from it are 1 wound models, which is great. It keeps them in theme, but the rest of your army doesn't have a theme, so that's a bit painful. Anyway, that's my view on Reanimation Protocols. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I don't like to be too negative in my videos, but unfortunately I think it had to be said with Reanimation Protocols. There was no alternative. So please let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Let's carry on growing this channel, and I'll speak to you all soon. Peace out.